Hello, everyone, Sunny Hills Church of Christ and visitors. Glad you're here. And this is our Friday morning devotional. I appreciate Maury covered Matthew chapter 6 on prayer in her devotional. And I'd like to continue thinking about Matthew chapter 6 and what's going on in there. And beginning with looking at the idea of the Lord's Prayer. In there, what we see happening is in each of the things Jesus tells us to pray about, we should be able to see that by praying these things, they're helping us align with God. And so when we're in prayer and we're saying, God, hallowed be your name, we're recognizing that, God's holy. He's separate. He's other, and he's in heaven. And excuse me, we're here on earth, and so we're aligning ourselves with him. And then his kingdom. We want his kingdom to come. We want him to rule in our lives. We need his sustenance. We recognize, we align ourselves with the fact that every day our food comes from him. He provides everything. And then also we not only need food for our bodies, but we need food for our souls. And so part of the health for our souls comes from forgiveness. And so we're looking for him to forgive us. We're aligning ourselves knowing that it's from him. We need to be forgiven. And then we look to him. We align ourselves with him to find power to defeat the power of Satan, and not to be led into temptation, but to be delivered from the evil one. And so all of these things in prayer are about aligning ourselves with God. And what comes before this segment on prayer and after it, I think both of these things, all three together, are designed, are Jesus' way of teaching us how to be aligned properly with God, and also to find ourselves with a more intimate relationship with God. Of course, prayer brings about an intimate relationship with God, and these other things can as well, like giving to the needy or fasting. And so there's a triad here of fasting, of giving, and praying and fasting. And in all of these, we see the opportunity to further align ourselves with God. I'm thinking of the song, this is a song that many people in our churches love. Our church loves it. When we sing for the Senior Living Center across the street and bring church services over there, I know whenever I go, and the other groups that go have told me as well, that one of the favorite songs that they want to sing, every time, is I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I'm his own. And the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. And that song can sound like it's saying nobody else has ever had an intimate relationship with God, but I don't think that's what the point is. I think the meaning there is no one else has ever known. I think it's trying to establish that there's a time with God. There's an intimacy that can be built with God where you have this relationship that it's nobody else's business. They're not in this. This is just between me and my God. And just nobody else is part of this moment. It's not that nobody else is part of any of our relationship with God. We have relationship with God in the family of God through the church. We have relationship with God as we live together in our own families and raise our children in faith. And so a lot of people are involved in our Christianity and our relationship with God. But there's that relationship with God that needs to be developed separate from anybody else. We need to find time with God, and we need to be practicing disciplines that have to do with God in such a way that this intimate one-on-one relationship with God is not only born but matures in us. So Matthew 6 begins, and Jesus says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you'll have no reward from your Father who's in heaven." And so whether it's giving or praying or fasting, or really any of the others, and anything else. So this is not an exclusive list or an all-inclusive list, but any of the things that we do that have to do with our righteousness or our like Christian activity, our religious stuff, any of those things, we have to be careful, he says. Be careful not to do them so that other people will see them and give us some kind of accolade, some kind of attention. We shouldn't be doing it to try to get people to like us or to get them to think that we're somehow more spiritual or to get them to in some way gain some advantage in the relationships because, hey, look at us, we're doing these things. Whatever it is, people do things for all kinds of reasons. And Jesus is saying there needs to be, when we're practicing our righteousness, he says, when we're doing good things in the name of God, he says there needs to be care taken to make sure that we are not, in doing those things, trying to point at ourselves. Now, he'd already said this in Matthew 5 when he said, you're the light of the world, but then he says, but let your light so shine among men that when they see your good deeds, they'll glorify your Father in heaven. Not when they see you doing good, they'll glorify you. And so this is why it takes very great care. We want to make sure that we're not pointing at ourselves when we're doing good things. We have to do everything we can to make sure it points to God. And so that means, whenever possible, make sure that we're not doing it to be seen of men, and especially like if we're giving. We don't have to let everybody know that we're giving or what we're giving. And for whatever reason, sometimes we do that. We want people to see that we're also doing something. But Jesus says, when you do that and you take the emphasis off of God as bringing something great into the world and you put it on yourself, well, there's your reward. You got the glory of men. But you're sacrificing something that God wants you to have. And so he says about giving, he says in verse 2, thus when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they've received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And so, I don't know if I know all the ways God will reward us, but I do know that one of the rewards, one of the heavenly treasures that comes out of this, that comes out of not making what we do all about other people seeing us and making it all about the relationships we have here, is that it isolates us in this relationship with God, where we just recognize this is between me and you, God. And that's important. So one more thing about that, after the prayer, about fasting, he says basically the same thing. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they've received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who's in secret. And your Father who is in secret will reward you. So it looks like all of these things Jesus is talking about, giving and praying and fasting, that they're all trying to teach us how to draw near to God in a way, in an intimate way, where it really is just about God and us individually. Not to say that there's not those other places where there's a corporate thing going on. There is, of course. But there also needs to be this, because you may have noticed it. Maybe you have to be a little older to kind of get this impression, but we are all, apart from God, we are all alone. It doesn't matter how much family we have, moms and dads or brothers and sisters, wives, children, husbands. It doesn't matter. We're not alone all the time and in every way. So we do have relationships, but some of you understand there is a sense, maybe all of you do, maybe it's ubiquitous understanding, but I don't think I always understood it. But there's a way in which we are alone. We recognize we're alone. Usually it comes up when we face some terrible illness, something debilitating, or maybe even facing death. And then we realize, it's just me. And if there's no intimate relationship with God, when these really, really serious times hit, or in the deep dark of the night, when you just kind of feel like, the temporality of everything, if there's no deep connection with God, then we will truly feel alone. And let me say, if you feel alone in those moments, if you have this sort of isolated feeling where if there's no one else around, I'm just alone, and if I face some horrible illness, or if I face some terrible diagnosis, or if I face maybe the doctor says I may have a life-threatening disease or problem, if we haven't developed this time with God, the loneliness will be terrible. And so this it's so important. Jesus wants us to experience this connection with God. I believe it's a connection that carried David through Saul's continued attacks on him. I believe it's the relationship with God that carried Joseph through all those years in prison and being abused by his family and sold into slavery and all of that. I think it's what gave Daniel peace when he had to sit in a lion's den overnight. There are times when we're alone, but we don't have to feel all alone. God is present. But if we're not nurturing a relationship with God, if we're not nurturing the presence of God and acknowledging it regularly in these ways, like Jesus said, and others, just calling out time for God. Jesus would often go spend all night in prayer all by himself on a mountain or something. If we don't nurture that, we won't experience that closeness in the hard times. And there's all kinds of other ways God wants to bless us and reward us. But the reward I don't want us to miss is that Jesus is showing us how to be aligned with God in a way where we find that intimate presence of God and find he is with us. And we have to acknowledge that as he goes through teaching in Matthew 6 about not laying your treasures up on earth and making sure your treasures are in heaven and you cannot serve God and money. All of these are ways of trying to correct the direction of the religious establishment of the time that had a whole lot of religion, but not a whole lot of God, not a whole lot of intimacy with God. And so my encouragement is to take seriously these words of Jesus and purposely find ways of blessing others, of serving others, of doing acts of righteousness or kindness in ways that people don't know. And you'll find you can be tickled by that. It's just you and God. You guys know. And you'll be blessed. You can trust Jesus. So God bless you today. Enjoy your Friday. Bye-bye.